What's up, guys? You know, it takes real bravery to fold. People talk about making a hero call or having the stones to put it in some situation, but what really separates the cowards from the heroes in my mind is the ability to press the fold button. The conviction to say, do you know what? I did have a good hand, things were going swimmingly for me, I had really high EV, but then A, B, and C happened, and now my hand is kind of 0 EV at best, and maybe the opponent is under bluffing in this spot, and I'm actually just going to lose a lot of EV on average if I call the river here. In the session you're about to witness, there were multiple spots where I was really put into the blender. I was put into some disgusting gross spots, and I actually quite enjoyed it. I actually relished being in these spots today, which is unusual. It's easy to suffer, throw your hands up in the air and say, woe is me, look how bad I'm running, yet another cooler, let me call it off and lose, oh no, I lost. This is a very easy rhetoric as a poker player to engage in, this sort of self-victimization and just real rigidity and being unable to adapt to the new status quo. When your equity plummets and your EV goes way down due to the board running out in a bad way or your opponent's range suddenly getting much stronger, your job is to fight those desires that make you cling on to the pot. Your job is to be brave, not be a coward. Any old fool can click the call button and lament their life, but can you take the extra 10 seconds? Can you get into that objective mindset and find the fold where others can't? That separates the high win rate players from those that break even or lose. Let's see if I manage this in this session where I was put in some of the really grossest spots you're likely to see today. Let's get into it. Alright, let's start this video off mid-hand. We've gone ahead and c-bet the flop here, cutoff versus small blind against a recreational player they've called. Turn looks like a really standard check to me. There's a lot of reasons why you wouldn't want to bet here, the main one being you're just in the middle of your range. You would be making a polarization error of some sort to bet here. Fold equity against better hands is minimal to none. The ability to get value is restricted, and betting most fatally reopens the action for no good reason and allows you to be jammed on. Now the question is, what is the best sizing here? I do think they're going to have too many combos of things like 10x in their range. I'm going to go for an overbet here. I think my hand is clearly strong enough. And I think we can get bluff caught in the bet check bet node really frequently from hands like 10x that probably should value bet but will often just play passively. Gets a fold that time, but yeah, I think that's going to be a good way to go. Over here, just c-betting king 7 deuce, nothing much happens. Going to show you pretty much every hand that I played today, apart from the really boring ones. Ace 9 here, we've defended against the min raise from hijack. Always good to know the positions and action sequence when you're in the hand, especially when you're multi-tabling like we are here. And I think Ace 9 is definitely going to be one of our bluffs on this turn. I think it's low enough. There's enough useful fold equity from Ace Jack, Ace King, etc. I'm going to bet this like 66% of the time here. I'm going to use the large bet when I bet. I don't use overbets on this turn card, simply because villain doesn't give me as much of a nut advantage when they check back that flop on that turn as they would on some other turns if they're checking back a properly protected range that contains enough flush draws, I mean. I don't think it's crazy to use overbets there in lower stakes where people are very bad at checking back flush draws. Generally, when you're using overbets, the main notion that you're abiding by is that your range is way more uncapped than that of your opponent. So that's the sort of marker we're looking for before we use overbets. Ace 10 of hearts, I think you can go either way. You can call, you can 3-bet. I'm just going to give it some kind of mix. Doesn't really matter. We'll go 50-50. Ace Jack would be pure. This one I think is way too far up to start bluffing. I don't think we can value bet here. I'm going to be using overbets on this turn. No, I'll probably use big bets on this turn actually. As my one sizing in this hand, I'm just going to pure check and check call. On the river, overbet looks quite good. Check also looks good. I think mixing some check here is fine. I'm going to mix overbet and check. I don't have a massive preference. Let's overbet this time. Meanwhile, over here, we actually did get called on the left-hand table, so we'll talk about that in a second. Kind of running out of time a little bit here on this table, so just gonna big bet. I think it's a pure big bet actually on 9-6 deuce rainbow. I think this board is dry enough that 10s would not be one of the overpairs we would slow play. I don't think it's horrible to slow play a hand like aces. So 6-5 and 7-8 and pocket 5s all get their own turn. The question is this enough to make me just want to big bet? I think the answer is yes. Do I ever want to mix check? I think the answer is no. Against a weaker player, I think I just want to greedily start going for 3 streets here on good runouts and go for 2 streets on less good ones. I prefer betting turn to checking back, giving a free card there and trying to play a bet check bet. Kind of line with 10s. I think 10s is just benefiting a bit more from the usefulness of the fold equity there. Let me just sit out and we'll see what our opponent called down with in that left-hand table, because I know you guys are big fans of results. Me too, actually. I'm quite curious. Wait till you see this showdown, guys. I just had a peek when I paused there. I know something you don't know. It's kind of interesting. I'm not going to berate this villain's play straight away because maybe it's not quite as bad as it looks. mixing between check and check here, actually never betting this hand on the turn. I think it's just a bit too good. If you were playing block bets, it might be viable to throw like ace-10 suited into like a value denial block bet range on the turn, because like if you do bet here and villain folds like the jack-7 of clubs, I mean, you're still folding a couple of live outs, I guess, like 4 live outs or something, but I think just going for check is normal here because we're not playing a block bet strategy on turn. That sizing doesn't exist. And then on the Jack of Hearts river, I think you can either go for a very big value bet with an extremely strong hand, or you can check. I probably wouldn't block bet because I don't trust pool to raise me frequently enough for that play to be good. If you guys see, like you're studying in GTO Wizard or Pile Solver or something like that, and you see the solver sometimes throwing this into, let's say, a small betting range, one of the reasons it may be doing that is that it's actually relying on being raised by Jack X for value and also bluff raised at really high frequency, because our range for block betting here is probably meant to be something like 8x, 6x, pocket 7s. So if villain has Jack 10, I think they have a clear raise against the block bet, especially with the 10 of hearts, and something like Queen Jack, King Jack, I would imagine would be a pure raise, and it'd be a lot of bluff raises too. And I don't think humans do a good job of that, so therefore I just opt for the line that doesn't require me to be raised very often to make money, which is overbet, and I go for this. Villain looked me up with True EV. The ace-7 of spades. The ace-7 of spades is obviously a bluff catcher, so the first thought you may have when you look at this hand is like, lol, 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 what an idiot, he called with ace high, what a moron, lol, 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 lol. Gonna troll you on Twitter and bully you until you cry. If you guys are having that thought, you should be ashamed of yourselves, shame on you. But one reason you might disregard this play as silly is just that it looks like a bad hand, but really if our range is polarized, like when we bet the river here, we either have a value bet or we have a bluff. All villain is saying when they call the river with ace-7 of spades is that they think that they're winning more than the amount of the time they need to win, which is about 37.5% to call a 1.5x overbet. It's not that difficult to win 37.5% of the time here if I'm over bluffing, and I have to be really careful actually that when I'm overbetting I don't just overdo it and lose control. So there's definitely a thought process where this player could think, well, I'm telling him I have a boat or a flush, I don't have very many combos like that, maybe he doesn't trust me not to have led many of them on the turn, and I can see how you get to the conclusion that you should call here. And I don't think it's obvious that calling here is like very bad or anything. It is obvious that this opponent is over defending against river overbet, but now that I've seen this, I don't know if that will happen in future. So taking a note there that says over defends against river overbet might not actually be that prudent a thing to do, because villain is also aware that he's just called your overbet and that you've seen that. So I think with note taking there we can be a little bit restrained. Guys, if you like poker and you like podcasts, you will definitely want to check out the Poker Distilled podcast, now available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Carrot Corner, Poker Education YouTube channel, and multiple other places. Poker Distilled is a 1-hour show. There's one episode every week. It comes out on a Monday, and in Poker Distilled, myself and my co-host Melissa will take you on a philosophical and psychological journey through many of the most fascinating aspects of this game that we know and love, and how those relate more broadly and deeply to real life and simply the condition of human existence. If this sounds to you like something you might enjoy listening to on your daily commute or some other point during your day, then why not give it a listen? That's Poker Distilled. It's completely free, and we hope you enjoy it. Now let's get back to the video. I think facing min raise here with King 7, we still have to fold. While this could be a weaker player and there's some skill edge, I think this hand is just too trashy against a hijack or cutoff opening range, whatever that was. That's when I'll just do some form of mix. I don't really care. When I say some form of mix, that's usually just going to be 33%. Queen 8's marginal and cutoff, but with a weaker player in the big blind, it becomes absolutely pure, just an open that you have to make. We'll talk about all these nitty-gritty spots today, you know, the real flow of the grind kind of spots. That's a good title, actually, the flow of the grind. What do you guys think? Maybe that will be the title. Maybe you guys already know that that's the title and I don't. Isn't it funny how the internet works? So I think we do want to go ahead and open the Queen 3 on most tables. Queen 10-4, I will simplify to betting range small. I don't do this on too many boards, but this is one on which I do. I have no problem snap betting when that's my strategy either. Don't really care if villain knows or assumes that. On the 8 turn, I think this is probably a pure check. There could be some bet to this, but I'm not sure, so I am just going to check this time. Very nice river, obviously, unless villain has the Jack 9. Going to be calling the overbet here. I think this is ostensibly a value beater. I think villain could be value betting 4-3 or 10-8 or something. And obviously we beat bluffs. There's the 4-3. 4-3 off, I wasn't expecting so much. I definitely don't think we can raise that hand. We're losing to straights, we're losing to sets and things. We're losing to some other 2-pair. Definitely just going to be a continue by calling that one. But what do I mean by value beater? Well, let me explain it to you. A value beater is a hand that doesn't just beat villain's bluffing range. So when villain bets on the river, what we need to understand is that they have a polarized range. And when we say we have a bluff catcher, what we mean is we have a hand that can only win against bluffs, so it might be able to catch bluffs sometimes, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily a call. It depends on maybe its blocker properties, whether we think the spot is overbluffed or underbluffed, how it's played by pool, that kind of thing. But when we have a value beta, what we're saying is, well, we still beat every bluff, but now we actually beat some of the value bets or chop with some of the value bets that villain is using as well. And when that's the case, we can actually infer that our hand is doing rather well. I'm gonna roll this at some frequency into 3-bet, but also do some calling, the jack-9. Doesn't really matter. King Queen here, we get flatted by a small blind player, so we'll just bear in mind that that hand is happening. Sometimes when I have two hands going on, I actually avoid like making complicated plays in one so I can focus on the other, especially where there's no EV gain. That said, I think this is going to be good to bet at high frequency big. I'll bet this maybe 60% of the time. I'm pretty indifferent. I think checking back the gutter on the flop here is also fine, and that's what we'll do this time. Three-way here on 4-5-5. I'm going to let one come off. I've got some showdown value. I don't want to be raised off of these premium pair draws, and I'd like to see what happens and gain a bit of transparency, so my plan will be to check flop there. The Jack of Diamonds now, I'm going to say this is now a pure bet. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it is. I think I can play block or big bet here. I think playing both of those sizes makes some sense. I do roll a big bet this time, so that's what I'll do. I think having two sizes there is not too ridiculous. I think actually sometimes having two sizes is easier than having one. There's the premium pair out I was talking about. Kind of nice to be able to have hit that against eights and be able to value bet twice. Now instead we're getting raised off the hand on the flop. If we bet small on this flop, which would be our sizing, weaker players are often good at raises. The question is, against this size, do we want to raise now or just call? I think when villain is three-way, they're usually going to have a stronger range than normal for making this bet, but I think it's going to be a merged one. This is really interesting, actually. I think when the other player comes along, I will just call and seek transparency. I don't think the fold equity I'm garnering here is that useful, and I think raising now becomes thinner because it just starts to look a lot scarier. The flip side to that is that we do get some useful fold equity from a gutter or something by raising, but we trade off not being able to bluff catch a river on that branch. This river spot's interesting against small bets. I'll definitely be calling again, because again, I think villain can merge like queen jack, queen 10, queen 9 type holdings here. They seem to be a recreational player. So if this goes bet, half pot, fold, I'm going to go ahead and call. And if this goes check, check, I'm going to go ahead and bet. I do think it's a little bit thin, but I believe that it's very unlikely that better hands will check this river here. Whereas like queen 10, queen 9, these hands are abound, 7, 8, 6, 7. Lots of other hands that can bluff catch here. So if this is checked to me, I'm definitely going to go ahead and bet about 60% pot, something like that. If this player bombs, I might fold. And they do bomb. The problem is here that this player actually called turn and is now potting river into two opponents. I think I clearly have a bluff catcher here, and I'd imagine this line is just under bluffed, so I am going to fold here. You can see there I'm being very willing to call the turn for transparency so that I can reassess the river. That's one of the reasons I actually want to do that. I think that's going to be something like pocket 7, 6, 8, some kind of straight really frequently. There aren't really busted draws or air that can get to that node, and I don't think people are turning some other pair into a bluff there or doing that with the queen. It'd be very weird if villain was playing queen jack that way, though not impossible, of course. Sometimes I'll just sort of level myself against a very bad player and fold the best hand because they're merging, but that's going to be quite rare there, especially three-way. You can see how on the river there, it's important to note that I had a plan for all the different things that could happen. I was using my downtime to somewhat plan ahead. And I think that's a really important skill to have, especially if you're multi-tabling where you're using that downtime. 10-9 here, I'm going to do some mixing with this. I'm going to actually call here, pure, in fact, because I just spotted we have a non-full stack in the big blind, so I'd much rather play this hand as a multi-way in position mining kind of outfit than as a 3-bet bluff pre-flop. 3-bet bluffing is going to be very close to break even, but flopping trip 10s against a weaker player is going to be very profitable. This is an interesting node, actually. Very interesting node. I'm actually going to sit out on my other table here after I play ace jack, and the reason for that is I really want to focus on this hand on the left. I really want to make sure I get this right. So I'm going to click sit out next hand over here, because this one is getting spicy. So he raises to 7. I'm just going to call here again, seeking transparency, again, not wanting to blow either of these weaker players out of the pot. I think they're probably both recreationals at this point. I mean, yeah, 3-betting here, but the 9 kicker just seems a little bit too thin in this action sequence. Over here, we actually turn top pair. And with weaker players in the pot, I think lead probably outperforms check here. This is getting really, really crazy on the left here. Now we get the jam from this player. Man, this is a gross spot. This is a gross spot. Can we fold trips in this situation? We do have really bad trips. They could maybe have like 10-6, 10-7 though in the big blind. They obviously have bigger trips here. They have some pocket 8s. I just know nothing about the opponent though. I don't think I can bring myself to fold here, although I do need close to 50% pot share. Bigger trips is quite a big part of this range actually. How crazy are they though? They shouldn't have overpairs either. Okay, this is actually not as good as I thought. The bigger trips exist offsuit, whereas the smaller ones only exist suited. Oh man, this is a really sick spot. I'm gonna fold. That could be a mistake, but that action sequence is just so unbelievably crazy. I really didn't think I'd be calling there to fold trips, but I think kicker is really important there. I think it's super important. Let me go over that hand again. That is insane. So what's really essential in a spot like this is that we fully engage with what we think our opponent's range is, instead of making some general and arbitrary descriptions of our hand or the spot. So first, let me go over some thought processes here that you guys might be having that I would really try and avoid having. The first one is the thought process of too tight, too nitty. It's too nitty to fold here. You can't fold trips. It's a cooler if you're losing. These kind of really silly, arbitrary, descriptive thought processes that are more about how comfortable you feel with folding rather than the EV of folding. You'll note that none of those thought processes actually go into the EV difference between calling and folding whatsoever. So let's get to that. So how do we frame this question in a way that really focuses on the EV of whether we call it off here or not? Well, let's retrace the action sequence. This is very important. So villain he's like 32-8 or something, by the way, over a very small sample. We basically know nothing, but this opponent does appear to be someone who is playing passively so far. You can see that from the fact that they don't have a full stack, that they've been tagged recreational. They're a passive recreational so far. So we get into this three-way pot here. 10-10-8 goes ahead and leads into two people already. So this is already like it's not that scary of an action. It's going to be quite mergy. There's going to be like 8x, there's going to be 10x, there's going to be jack 9, jack 7, hands like this sometimes. There's going to be 9-7, there's going to be queen jack. There's going to be hands like random pocket pairs sometimes in the mix as well. But this is a pretty scary thing that happens next, because this player actually goes ahead and raises, indicating that they probably have like overpair plus. This is obviously a very silly thing to do because you're just reopening the action to this player for no reason without actually getting any value. This is a very poor play in my opinion. Well, not even just, it's subjectively a terrible play. There's no reason to ever do this here. You would much rather just call than do this. Just call and see what happens. There's no problem with the call button. There's no need to reopen and reaggress for such a minimal, pointless amount. You're just giving your opponent more options for no reason. So we call here because transparency is of the utmost importance. Transparency is a play that's really come up a lot today. I don't think I'll name the video transparency, but it's definitely one of these concepts that can really guide you to know what to do later. So basically, the idea behind transparency theory is that by investing the minimum now in an exploitatively very transparent situation, where our opponents are likely to tell us what they have, we actually garner a ton of information. So it's really funny that in game here, my first thought was, oh no, this is like a cooler and I can't fold. Whenever your first thought is, I'm going to get coolered here, but I can't fold, you have to ask yourself, like, is it really the case that you can't fold? Because if it is a cooler, that does mean that like you're supposed to get it in, but then it's not true that you're going to get stacked all the time, and you shouldn't have this really ominous feeling in the pit of your stomach that you're going to lose like way too often here. Another thing we want to frame early on in this thought process is that my required equity to get it in here isn't a million miles away from 50%. I have to call off about 80 here, and the final pot is going to be something like 200 or something like that. So I'm barely getting 2.5 to 1 here. I'm going to be requiring quite a lot of equity to get this in. It's going to be much closer to 50% than it would like the pot size bet target of 33%. So what am I winning against? Let's ask that. I can clearly see a lot of hands I'm losing against. I'm losing against pocket 8s. I'm losing against jack 10, queen 10, king 10, and ace 10, as well as 10-8. So there's quite a lot of hands that beat me here that are combinatorically fairly available to a player that's flatting a lot of offsuit Broadway in the big blind, and most fish are playing that way. So king 10 here offsuit could be as many as 4 combos. Well, king 10 offsuit is 3 and king 10 suited is 4, but king 10 proper could be 4 combos. Ace 10 another 4 combos, queen 10 another 4, jack 10 another 4. That's 16 combos of 10x that beats me. Now, the only ones I beat are the low ones, but I don't think they exist in the offsuit format. So like 10-6 suited and 10-7 suited are 2 combos proper. 2 combos. Is this player doing this with like slow played pocket kings? Maybe. Maybe they've slow played kings in the most absurd manner pre-flop and are now playing it like an absolute imbecile, but it seems very unlikely. I think this is a really easy fold now. It's amazing how in game, I almost convinced myself to call this off through the very excuse-driven reasoning of he could have a worse 10. This is such a common thing that poker players do all the time, and if you go back and watch this bit in the video, the live bit, let's actually go back and watch what I did in game here. Let's watch this key moment where I sort of changed my mind. No, I don't think I can bring myself to fold here, although I do need close to 50% pot share. Bigger trips is quite a big part of this range, actually. How crazy are they, though? They shouldn't have overpairs either. Okay, this is actually not as good as I thought. The bigger trips exist offsuit, whereas the smaller ones only exist suited. Oh man, this is a really sick spot. I'm gonna fold. Okay, so as you can see there, I was very much starting off with this, like, I am compelled to invest. I have to call. This is a cooler for me. This kind of like, woe is me mantra. Like, I cannot bring myself to fold. Why is that? It's because I had an underlying desire that I didn't want to fold. I'll be very honest with you guys. It's the mental game leak. It's an issue. I didn't want to fold because it's painful to fold trips because of something I call fortune reversal tilt. Fortune reversal tilt is when we get into a hand, it starts off very good for us and our brain is full of endorphins and positive emotions, and then a series of things happens that tells us that the spot is now terrible. Our EV plummets to somewhere near zero here for sure, probably losing, and then my first thought is not, let's assess objectively, but it's like, I am feeling a really strong desire to not fold, let me justify that somehow. So this is all about making a big fold and having the composure and the balls to do it. Do you have the stones to make a big fold in a spot? Because it's much, much easier to take the coward's way out and call than it is to make a big fold. Folding takes courage, paradoxically. And I'm glad I was able to compose myself here, do the combinatoric assessment, and realize that unless villain is a very spewy, bad recreational that's jamming like jacks and not 3-betting them pre, and jamming queens and not 3-betting them pre at a high frequency, I'm actually just losing here very frequently. So I really like this fold, actually. Let's play a few more hands for this video. Another hand occurred, and I'm really sorry guys, I didn't press unpause. It's still kind of early in the morning here. Well, it's 10 o'clock, that's early enough for me to blunder apparently. But this hand is so key to our theme that we've been speaking about today, which is having the conviction to fold in a spot and make quite a big fold. Now, I'm not super happy about how I played the turn here. In hindsight, I think I should go back and really think about this. I think I may have butchered the turn, but let's talk about the river. So I open tens here in the hijack. I open tens under the gun actually, and I get a call from the button. Now in this situation, I'm playing mostly just a range check strategy under the gun against button on low boards in general, because although I was a pre-flop raiser, the concept of initiative here isn't really important. It doesn't matter. It's more relevant here that this board is going to be reasonable for the button. The button is snug and tight pre-flop in this spot because they're a reg. They're not cold calling king jack off and stuff that fish would cold call. So we actually have a range disadvantage. We're out of position, which makes our EV even lower, and we want to start off by checking a lot, just as we would if we were like a big blind caller. If the hijack opened and you called out of the big blind, you wouldn't like start leading this flop. You should think about it that way as well. So we do check with everything. Villain checks back. On this turn, villain's range improves even further. They're going to have the monopoly on combos like 7s, 8s, 9-8, 6-7, 7-8, 10s, 5s, etc. They probably bet 5s and 6s on the flop, so I don't think they're going to have that, but they can certainly have 9s here, 7-8, 7s, just lots of hands at a high frequency, jacks, hands that are good, and I'm going to have the monopoly on the worst stuff imaginable. So ask yourselves, what is the worst thing imaginable on a board like 5, 10, 6, 9? Well, it's like ace, king of spades, and we unfortunately have the rights to that hand, and villain doesn't. So that sucks for us. Our range can be running at an advantage based on having more good hands than our opponent, or a disadvantage where we have more bad hands than our opponent. So it's not all about just counting up who can have the most nuts. That's not how favorability, a Carrot Poker School term to describe whose range is doing better in a spot, that's not how favorability works. So villain goes for 2x pot. Now, my thought process went as follows on the turn. I think I maybe got this note wrong. I kind of said to myself here, I think this is like obviously hyperpolarized. Villain is claiming to have better than 2-pair here, 2-pair plus. I don't think they have 5-6 when they check back flop very often, although it's not impossible. I don't think they have 5s or 6s ever. I think they can have 10-9, but it's heavily blocked. 10s is heavily blocked. So I guess they have 9s a lot for value. That's their main value hand, and maybe a little bit of 7-8 if they do call that sometimes. If there was a weaker player in the big blind here, which there could be, I don't know, it'd be more likely that they have a hand like 7-8. I think GTO would probably play some raise here. I think it would build a little bit of a raising range because we're out of position. But against 2x pot, I can't see it playing much raise at all. But here's the thing, when you do check out of position, you are still uncapped to an extent because you don't have to value bet out of position where you can check raise. You normally don't have to value bet. So I think in theory, there could be some raise here. I think in practice, what's most likely going on is one of two things. Either my opponent's range is just like too merged and they just have like too many draws and high equity draws and they're not bluffing enough like low equity stuff here. which is very plausible, or they're like losing control and thinking that 2x pot is just like a good way to like get me to fold my entire range or just exploit me or something like that. So if they're over bluffing here and they can show up with like ace jack or something like that, or ace queen and they're really losing their mind, or king queen at full frequency here, then probably I do best just calling and trying to get them to bluff river again. However, there is a trade-off here. Whenever they have like a big draw, combo draw, flush draw, nut flush draw, whatever, open ender, raising is going to probably be really good because we deny a lot of equity and get a lot of value immediately. So if I could redo this one, I think I would raise the turn, and I think that's because I'm not convinced that after 2x pot here, there's going to be enough low EV bluffs. I don't think there are many low EV bluffs in range naturally here, right, that villain can actually cold call with on the button, and the ones they do have look very unappealing to 2x pot. Like, can you imagine just getting here with ace jack of diamonds and 2x potting? I don't think that happens very often. So if you made me guess what's happening in reality with this range, I would say that it's probably way too flush draw and straight draw heavy, way too many like queen jack, hearts, etc. And then obviously nines is like a really, really frequent hand that they're going to have here. I think like the check back flop and turn a set and then try and make up for lost ground by 2x potting is extremely prevalent in pool, because I think they just have nines a ton here in reality, don't have 7-8 very much, and because I think they're very high equity draw heavy here. I should really raise this turn to like 34 or something. I actually called, which I thought would be like a GTO line some of the time, but I really don't like it now. I think this is a case of not doing enough hand reading. This is something that you can easily suffer from, and the river is the worst thing in the world. So the river means that when villain does this, they no longer have nines, right? You can't overbet nines here on this river when queen jack and hearts all get there. I just don't think this is a thing now. So if villain's gonna bet nines here, I think they're gonna bet like b75, if they're going to bet nines at all, which is unclear. And we still lose to 7-8, which we did already. We now lose to all flushes and all queen jack. And now the question is, okay, our fortune has reversed in the most extreme way here. We started off on the flop with really, really great EV. On the turn we had amazing EV still. Maybe we went wrong there, but now on the river it's time to not get too pissed off, don't get frustrated, but calibrate to the fact that our EV is just plummeted to 0. In equilibrium, I believe this is a break-even call, and I'm making that assumption because it has neutral to good blockers, but the sizing is very large. So the blockers are neutral to good because we don't block any bluffs whatsoever. Villain is not bluffing with a 10 here. However, we also don't block any value bets. We don't have a jack or a queen, and we don't have a heart. So villain's value betting range is flushes and straights here. We block none of it. So there's no way this can be like a really winning call in GTO. I don't think it can be a really losing call either, but I just, based on my read of the turn, that I think I should have raised because villain's range is too high EV draw ridden. It just means that there's really no way of bluff catching this river in reality. It compels me to now just recalibrate and fold, because like, what do I think they're bluffing with here if they haven't lost their mind with the pocket sevens merge or the ace jack of spades on the turn? Like, how can they be bluffing? So again, I really felt this rising tide of like regret, like, oh no, I should have raised turn, now I'm gonna call river and cry and tantrum about it and kick and scream when I lose. But then I thought, no, I have a bluff catcher in a spot that I've deemed to be for the very reason that I think I should have raised turn, which is that they don't have enough low EV bluffs that aren't flush draws or straight draws like queen jack. I don't think I can call river because there's no air now, basically. I think I do really badly by calling this river, actually. I'm really proud of this fold, and I'm really proud of the last fold I made. I think I could have done better on turn here, but overall, the moral of the story is it takes some real guts and courage to fold sometimes. It's much easier to make a run-of-the-mill, routine-looking crying call than it is to make a really brave fold. So guys, be brave. Don't just click call because woe is me and you're feeling regret and you're feeling fortune reversal. Think about it. Allow yourself the window to reconsider. Allow yourself a little bit of time and allow objectivity to seep back into your thought process. Your desires, your human yearnings will make you want to call. You don't have to act on them. And if you give yourself 10 seconds, you can diffuse them and buy yourself that lovely window of time to reconsider. Hope you enjoyed this video. For everything that we do, for all of our paid content, it's carrotcorner.com. Do smash the like button, let us know what you think. We'll be back with more content very soon, every Wednesday, every Friday here in Carrot Corner Poker Education. And I'll see you guys then. Bye for now.